They said it couldn't be done. And they were right until right now. That's right, you guys, the title's not lying to you. I have found a Sliver build that actually wins. And not just some of the time, this thing wins pretty damn consistently. It's got a couple of weaknesses that we'll talk about throughout the week while we're playing it. But for right now, I just want to get this shown to you because it is insane how well this deck is doing. It's a complete 180 for this particular deck. This build has changed this thing for me quite a bit. It's going to be a little weird. I want you to brace yourselves, and it's going to be kind of a strange deck tech because there's not really any reason for this to work well, but we'll get in. You'll see what I'm talking about, and there you go. You can see over from the right that we are rocking a strange mana curve, some might say, because there are no green in there. Well, I'll explain it to you guys. The reason there's no green mana is because we're not rocking any green spells. We got 23 lands, pretty evenly distributed between white and red. The red is just slightly higher than the white. We'll get into why that is as we go through the cards, obviously the CMC and things like that. But altogether, this build, just as a blanket note for this deck is a bash and stall. It is a speed and stall deck, okay? So we've got guys who are going to give us first strike and stuff like that. Other than that, we have a pretty good removal set, to be honest with you. We have a pretty sweet removal set. Between those two aspects, this deck is actually able to run pretty well. Now, this is going to be kind of unorthodox as we go through here because, like I said before, I'm not exactly sure why this works. It kind of takes the worst aspects of all three things we bring to the table. From red, you don't have a lot of face damage, you don't have a lot of burn. From white, you don't have a lot of, buff or a lot of, long-term removal or cool guys. And from slivers, you don't have the green slivers that actually make your dudes bigger. So 3 weaknesses right there, but the build strategy and the tech behind it to get going fast and get going hard and then stall your opponent out long enough for you to set that up actually works, I promise you. Let's start up here and let's just kind of talk about who's staying home. Obviously everything with green is out of this deck. That's not too much of a problem because, and we can do it this way, right? Yeah, that's not too much of a problem because I don't really miss any of these cards. Fiery Justice isn't really bad. This gets kind of a bad rap, but especially with fairies and stuff flying around, you can do quite a bit well unless they have Shroud. You can do quite a bit of damage to some creatures, get rid of their defenses, even if the opponent gains 5 life. If you're able to wipe out their defenses and bash in with double strike or something like that, you're going to take them down a lot more than 5. I considered splashing green for this card, but it's not actually worth it. This thing's too big. Yeah, it's got a lot of tricks. It does a lot of stuff. Trample and first strike is always fun. You have a lot of stuff that gives you double strike in the pile as well that would have made this even more ridiculous. But personally, I'm just not a huge fan of it. It costs a little too much for this deck to run super well. And then you've got Armadillo Cloak, Unflinching Courage. That is out again because we have the green. That's not too painful of a miss either because you're going to get 2 for 1 almost every single time you play that thing. Every single deck has a way to deal with that. So, and against some of the decks, that's even going to be kind of a buff to the other side. I think we could just go through and try and get to green too. Obviously, none of these cards are going to be in there either. And this is going to be the lion's share of the cuts. But if we're just looking at this, there's not really anything we really need. The mana ramp is not necessary because we have a perfect mana base right here. The 11 and 12 runs super well, so we don't need things like Rampant Growth at all, and we don't need things like Cultivate at all. Befernticate is not necessary either, and it's definitely not something that we need green for. It's not missed too badly on my part either. I mean, you can search your library for a permanent card with the same name as target non-token creature, put that card onto the battlefield. It's pretty good late game because you can get some big guys out and switch things around, but this deck, as you can see, stops at 5, and you want it to curve out perfectly at 4. You want to actually stall yourself at 4. We'll get into that later. So this guy's not actually that good when taking that into account. Neither are these mana grabbers when taking that, what we'll soon see into account either. This guy's the buff guy. The +3/+3 we're not really going to miss. Wild Pair's pretty fun because we have a lot of creatures that share names and stuff like that and share, you know, power and toughness, obviously. So you'd be able to do a lot of fun total stuff that way, but it's not really necessary in this build. And again, the CMC is way higher than what we want. And then this guy just costs way too much, and the trample isn't really enough of a buff. And then, of course, we don't need these because our mana is correctly constructed, and this is only a 2-mana deck. The other thing that you're going to find in this deck is they're going to think your mana screwed, which is going to be really helpful. The Predatory Sliver is really the only green card that I miss regularly. Luckily, we're fast enough and removal heavy enough in the early game that he's not a creature that we're going to miss too much. But obviously, you can see that we have 0 2-drops, so we do have a dead turn if we don't have something to burn or Path to Exile at that point. And then Survival of the Fittest, we don't really need either. It's an enchantment and stuff too. Alright, so getting rid of all that, let's talk a little bit more about the other cards we're leaving out. This guy is just a buff to the rump, and we have to be really judicious about what cards we actually bring to the party. This guy is not aggressive enough to be in this deck. He costs 3, that's out. This is also a defensive card. We need to be more aggressive than that, so Indestructibility is out as well. We'll talk more about why one of those is missing in a second. This costs way too much since we want to curve out and stop at 4. If we got to a situation where we needed to use Inferno, we would have to play 3 more lands, right? 5, 6, 7. So 5, 6, 7, yeah. So we'd have to play 3 more lands. That's 3 more turns. That's way too much time. So Inferno, while it would be good and advantageous in this pile, is not good enough in the instances that we would need to use it. It takes us too long to get to it because we're hoarding mana at a certain point. Shared Animosity is just a bad card, so that is out. It buffs very sporadically. It's not reliable. It's not something that I want to do. It was in here for a little bit. I did play test with it. It does not work in this build. And I know that's kind of counterintuitive because I said this was supposed to be hyper aggressive, but just trust me on this. It is not a good fit. Going through, we're going to talk about Lifeline. You can do crazy stuff with Lifeline, I know. It's just too much of a headache to deal with, and it is not this deck's strong suit by far. We don't have enough removal and other stuff to try and get ahead of Lifeline and figure stuff out. So, I mean, because if your opponent's generating tokens and stuff, I don't know. There's a ton of stuff we could talk about with Lifeline. I'm not going to hold a seminar about it. It is not worth dealing with in this deck. So there you go. That's everything that's upstairs, and I think that kind of gives a pretty broad view of what this deck is going to look like. But talking about what we're actually taking down into battle, we are, of course, bringing Striking Sliver. We have the 2-pack of those guys, so 2 of them, because that's going to give our guys first strike early on. Later on, we'll have double strike and things like that, but this early game first strike is going to help to stall out to those later turns where we're able to take care of our opponent. We run all 3 Path to Exile because this card is going to vastly improve your life. It's also going to give your opponent a land. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But we can also use this on one of our own guys if we need to kill a token off to get a land, if we're missing something, or if we need to accelerate late game because we've been holding out at 4 mana, we can just Path to Exile and kind of take care of stuff that way too. We don't really miss too many pieces of the whole here because a lot of our guys are duplicates, I mean. So we don't need 2 of them. Their powers don't stack in a lot of cases, especially in this deck. They don't stack at all, I want to say. So Path to Exiling our own guy is not really terrible. Shock is also going to help you bring yourself to that mid game. This is not a late game deck, and this is not really an early game deck. This is mid-range for sure. That's what you want to be doing here. And Shock's going to help you get to that. It's also going to be 2 damage to your opponent's face, which is always useful. 3-pack of them. It is an instant, for Pete's sake. You got to run Shock. It's fantastic. We've got these 2/2 for 3s, not fantastic, but they do say Sliver Construct on them, which means it's going to get our buffs and things, and we need something to do 3 drop. I mean, we only got 12 spells to play at 3 drops, so we need something to do. So I run all 3 of those guys. 2 Mirror Entities, but I cannot stress enough that I've seen this card misplayed so many times in the game that I feel like I have to point this out. I'm sure that a lot of you guys already know this. If you've been watching my videos for a long time, I'm sure you guys, and I've talked to you guys in the comments, you guys are good. But if you're newer to Magic, I just want to point out and make sure that you guys know that this is not +X+X. It's a really common mistake. I think I made it when I first played with this card back in the day. But what this actually does is it changes to XX. So you want to make sure that you don't go below your highest attack because you're going to be actually weakening that creature. So let's say, for instance, that we have a 2/2 out, and let's say we had one of these guys up here, all the way over here, like one of these 5/5s, okay? If we tap 3 mana for Changeling, now that would be advantageous for Blur Sliver, but it's not going to become a 5/5. It will become a 3/3, and this guy is not going to become an 8/8. It will become a 3/3. So when we're playing the game, you want to make sure if you're using Changeling that your lowest common denominator is your highest power and toughness card. That way you're not going to be weakening some of these guys that are giving you those advantages. You don't want to weaken your characters, or your creatures, rather. So just be careful with that. It's also instant speed, so use it as you're blocking when your opponent's declared blockers. Don't use this, first main or something like that, or second main, which is just a complete waste because it's till end of turn. Use it during that block step before assigning damage. That's how you play Mirror Entity. We run 2 of them because it's a fantastic card when properly used. Blur Sliver is kind of the driver in this thing. It's what can make this an early game deck. We can sew a couple matches up on turn 4 if we're lucky, and if Blur Sliver's with us on the field. I run all 4 of that guy. The haste is super useful. 2 dudes is not fantastic because we don't have the buff, but they're extra damage on the field. They are in a pinch after that 4 mana mark. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We can get 2 guys out. We've also got stuff that gives double strike. So I run all 3 of the Hive Stirrings. I know it's 3 mana for 2 1/1s, but it is worth it. Those guys are going to hold down the fort, and like I said, we can get rid of tokens later if we need to get some land. Bone Scythe Sliver is a fantastic dude. It grants double strike. You want to cast this guy almost as a sorcery. You don't want to telegraph that punch. So you want to make sure that you have the haste from Blur Sliver, or you want to have like 10 damage out on the field or something like that. Play Bone Scythe. Everybody gets double strike. You attack in for 20 instead of the 10. But don't give them an opportunity to kill this thing, because once this is dead, you're a really sad person. Now, I know I said I don't like indestructibility, but there is a problem with this build, and the problem is that we have 1 open space. We talked about it earlier. I wanted to put Inferno in, but the mana goal in this deck is to really top off at 4 and just have those 8/5 drops. I can play that land later and play those guys down. Inferno's just too expensive. So unfortunately, I do put an indestructibility in here. As a 1-of, it's very strange, but to be honest with you, there's not another card that I want to run in this entire deck. I've tried all of them, excluding the green, and I even did try Lifeline. Just the 1-of indestructibility is going to be just enough to confuse your opponent or make them, waste removal on something else, because you can play it on something stupid if you wanted to, and then just chump block down. That's also going to help you get to a little bit of the later game, but once we hit turn 4, we're kind of on the train to Loserville if we're not kind of sewing things up at that point. But against certain decks, it can save your Bone Scythe Slither, so that is worth talking about as well. Indestructibility is not a complete waste, especially in those instances. So the 1-of, I'm okay with. Face Fetters is a fantastic card. It is a great removal spell. It's going to stop your opponent from being able to use that permanent's activated abilities unless they're mana abilities. And it can't attack or block, which is fantastic. Plus, we get 4 life, which is pretty useful in this deck because we have to be aggressive, so we can't be worrying too much about our life totals. We have to be bashing in damn near every turn. Fetters on the field is going to give us a little bit of a boost. It's going to be almost like we blocked earlier on, and it's going to stop more damage coming at us and those abilities, like I said, which is fantastic. I love this thing. Face Fetters all day, baby. And here we go. We're at Armageddon. A lot of you might have seen an old video just a couple days ago that I posted talking about Armageddon and a fantastic play between Armageddon and Path to Exile. My opponent Path to Exiled one of my cards and then Armageddon's, and I thought that was super cool, super great actually. And I figured that if we played around the deck and didn't hamper the deck, that's the most important thing. We didn't hamper the deck or severely cripple it by culling the pool of cards. I'm going to explain that because that didn't come out super clear. If you're using Armageddon in a standard deck where you don't pay very careful attention to what your CMC is, then Armageddon is useless to you. But if you make sure that you saw off at 4 lands, once you play that 4th land in this deck, you do not have to play another land until you draw one of these guys. If you have one in hand, you feel free to play the 5th, but never play the 6th. You don't need a 6th. In case you draw Armageddon, you can immediately play it, and then you've got lands and dudes in your hand. You are going to win. Now, one thing I will say is that not too many people are catching on to this because not too many people think of Armageddon as an actual viable card. But if you're playing against a higher level opponent, laying that 5th or 6th land could get them off the Armageddon thinking. You don't want them holding on to lands. You want to be the only one with lands when you lay this thing. But that's kind of what the whole build idea, build strategy for this deck was. Once I saw that, and that guy was running green, I believe. But once I saw that, I went, what if I just built this entire deck around this one little mechanic just as a plus? You know, like Armageddon does not drive this deck, but the fact that we cut off at 4 and we only dip into 5 occasionally means that Armageddon can show up and we're always happy to see it. You'll see it throughout the week. It's actually won me 2 games already in playtesting, so hopefully we'll see more of this card, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. 2 Armageddons, of course, that's how many they give us. I run all 3 Thorncaster Slivers because this guy's actually fantastic. He's a little bit of a removal spell, plus you can just take it up to your opponent's dome. It's that 1 damage, of course, for every attacking creature. If you got the haste out there, it's even better. If you've got this thing out there, it's even better. These really stack. The red abilities of Slivers actually really work well together and gel well together because you can kill some defenders, take that damage, all that damage straight upstairs. So it's a really good card. I run all 3 of these, and like I was saying, once you get into this deep end, once you get that 4th mana down, when you see one of these cards is when you're going to want to actually play that 5th. So it's not hard to be able to play these. You're just going to be like, I am holding on to this land. Once you draw this guy, you're like, land, this guy, go. So it works out pretty well. This guy's just a buff. I run 3 of them. Battle Sliver is +2/+0. It's really going to help with the first strike and things as well. Coat of Arms is a card that I absolutely hold on to unless I know that it will make me win. There are a lot of decks out there that are going to benefit from this. Now, one thing that is kind of scary is that there are some decks that are going to be able to cast stuff out of our hand, and they can somewhat benefit from this. Not too much, but they can somewhat benefit from this as well because they have some creature types that are together. I would not run this normally, but as I was saying earlier, like, this is a dead draw more often than this is a dead draw. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not a perfect deck, obviously. You know what I mean? Like, but this would be a dead draw more than this. This is going to win me the game when I play it. But if I'm in a bad situation or I'm playing elves or something, I'm just not going to play it, you guys. I'm just going to keep it in my hand. There's nothing that says I have to play Coat of Arms if I grab it or if I draw it. The only thing is that if I sit across the table from elves, then I just know I have 1 dead drop. 1 dead draw in my deck. That's all. I just draw a Coat of Arms. I go, shit, that's not what I needed right now. Pass turn. You know, that's just how it works. Savage Beating is going to win you some games too. You're doing it for that extra combat phase normally because you usually have double strike. But we run 1 of those. There you have it, you guys. That is my Sliver build. This build does work. It's good. It is strong. It is ready to rock. I hope you guys enjoyed looking at it, kind of getting a glimpse into the madness. Do not knock it till you try it, and do not try it until you see the build strategy videos while we're playing it, because I think that's really going to dive more into what this thing is supposed to do. It's really hard to explain. Like I said, it's kind of the worst of all 3 worlds. It's hard to kind of figure why it's working. But if you're playing it right, this thing will win you games, and they are very satisfying, the Sliver wins. There you go, red, white Slivers. That's what I got for you this week. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I want to officially welcome all of you to the Technovolver channel. The link to that channel is down in the description. Andrew and I just shot an awesome video. It's the first in a series that we're going to be doing that is called At a Glance, and that's where we're going to take a game, we're going to play it for like a half hour or so, right around there, half hour or an hour, and just kind of talk about what the game's like, try and see if you guys would be interested in playing it. or anything like that. The game we did for this week is Just Cause 2 Multiplayer. It's a mod that is setting the world on fire. It's a lot of fun, so we checked that out for a while. I will say that I've had a lot of issues trying to upload that to YouTube. YouTube's kind of fighting me on it a little bit, but that is coming. It was supposed to be up today at 10 a.m., but unfortunately, you know, between, you know, my main work job and everything, and the fact that YouTube's fighting me on it, it wasn't up at that point, but it will be up sometime this week. So go over to Technivolver, subscribe, and tell all your friends about that video. Anybody who's interested in video games at all, that is the channel for them. Even if they don't like Magic, we're not playing Magic over there. And even if they hate Just Cause, just be like, no, man, these guys are great. Just Cause is not even important. And please share that video. It would mean the world to me. And please subscribe to that channel too. I'd appreciate that as well. But Jesus Christ, that was way too many words of just self-promotion. Let's bring it back to what really matters. And that's Magic the Gathering, you guys. And I'll be showing you some Magic the Gathering starting probably 2 days from now because it's Christmas break. But I promise those videos will be up. Thanks a lot for watching this one, you guys. As always, I super appreciate it, and I will see you all next time.